what's shaking, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of our Prize Picks video. I'm Jeff Ketchum. That is Anwar Richardson. This video is sponsored by Prize Picks. Make sure you use that promo code OrangeBloods. They will 100% match your initial deposit up to $100. You just got to use that promo code. Let them know we sent you over by using that promo code OrangeBloods. We're going to talk about some Prize Picks later on in the video as it relates to the Texas Bowl game against Washington coming up in about a week now. But first, a week from today, as a matter of fact. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about Arch Manning. I'm talking to Santa Anwar today. And Arch Manning puts pen to paper, or I guess DocuSign to computer screen yesterday. He's officially a Longhorn now. He is a Longhorn football player who will be on campus in less than a month. So part of what this video discussion is today is about projecting what happens with Arch Manning once he's on campus, now that he's going to be an early enroller. He'll participate in spring practice. Sarkisian mentions yesterday that he's not really thinking about redshirt stuff right now because in his mind, a redshirt season, even that is still half the season almost. So there's a lot of things that you can do. Anwar, what's your gut feeling going into year one of where expectations of the Arch trajectory should begin?
Well, Catch, I think that, it's going to be a lot to ask him coming out of spring practice to be kind of in that too deep, right? I think we're expecting Quinn and, of course, Maalik to be the main guys who are battling. But I think, Catch, what we need to be hearing and seeing is Arch kind of knocking on the door. And we need to be hearing practice reports that, our sources need to be telling us, yeah, those guys took the majority of reps, but then Arch came in, looked really pretty damn good. We need to be thinking that there's a door or a window open of opportunity for him. We didn't have that with Maalik last year, Catch, right, because of the injury. So that you never really got that and from him. But if we can get that going into and then start building some momentum going forward, because look, Catch, he's made it very clear, Sarkisian, that he will have a quarterback battle in 2023. Like, he's made that very clear, and you and I both know. He said that a couple of years ago as relates to Casey Thompson and Hudson Card, and he was true to his word. The following year, he didn't have any favorites to the point that, he basically announces a guy in training camp, and it was a pretty close battle going forward. So I think we need to hear Arch in the conversation. I predict that he will be in the conversation. The question will be, you and I both know that the Manning plan has always been go ahead and let him redshirt. The question will be, can he get to the point where whatever they plan for a redshirt season kind of comes off the table?
Yeah, I think once they get into the spring, and I think this will go into fall camp as well, I think there are two questions that we'll constantly be checking to see what the answers are. Question number one, is Maalik Murphy taking any first-team reps away from Quinn Ewers? I think you and I would fully expect that certainly in the spring, Quinn Ewers is your first-team quarterback. I mean, he's going to start in the bowl game. He started all season long. He has to be the odds-on favorite to be the starter, even if there is a true quarterback battle during the offseason. But if we start to see that Maalik Murphy is taking more and more first-team reps, I think it's a sign that there's maybe a real battle taking place there. It's not much of a battle if throughout the entire offseason, Quinn Ewers is exclusively taking first-team reps at the quarterback position. Mm-hmm. The second question then becomes, is Arch Manning taking second-team reps away from Maalik Murphy? And it's the same kind of mental process. Now, is he taking second-team reps because Maalik is taking more first-team reps and that there's some residual there? Or is Quinn Ewers taking exclusively the first-team reps? And as the year goes on, where I think Maalik Murphy, first day of the spring, is probably taking 90% of second-team reps, do we get to a point where maybe maybe by early August, it's more 50-50. If that's the case, then I think it speaks to where Arch in year one potentially goes from a playing time standpoint. Because when we get to the first game, I don't think Arch Manning's winning the quarterback battle. Mm-hmm. But if he's number 2, regardless of who's number 1, well, then you just have to buckle up, because I think every Texas fan will go to every game thinking to themselves, we're one play away from the Arch Manning era beginning. We're one bad quarter away from a quarterback getting pulled and the Arch Manning era beginning. I think the one thing that Sarkisian will know is that once that genie is pulled from the bottle, it'll become very difficult to put it back into place.
Well, you're so right about that, Catch, because there's always the next guy. And so over the last couple of years, it was, Casey may have had the job, but Hudson might be that guy, right? And that ends up getting the job. And then all of a sudden, Quinn kind of becomes the new flavor of the month. But now, Quinn is going to be kind of put in a situation that's very unfamiliar with, because his backup will end up being probably the more popular person and the person that everyone's clamoring for. See, no one was really clamoring for a Hudson Card to get on the field this season, Catch. There was never, and maybe towards the end, maybe a couple of games where he struggled, there were questions, right? Like, why isn't he playing like a TCU game where he struggled? Like, why isn't he getting more reps? And I think I even had to ask that question. But I don't think anyone was standing on the table defiantly saying, this has got to happen. But if Quinn struggles, or if there's or it resembles a little bit of last season, there will be a resounding pounding of the table, Catch, that you got to put in Arch. And that how he handles that and the pressure of that will be very interesting. It's going to, Quinn will be faced with a very competitive quarterback room, probably his most competitive quarterback room since Ohio State. But he will have guys that are nipping at his heels, to your point, Maalik Murphy, Arch will be there. And of course, the Arch is going to be, it's crazy, as popular as Quinn was, the Arch shadow is so
ironic.
Isn't it? I mean, that Quinn shadow was so huge. And then there's this night becomes, I wish I was good in earth science, because I'm sure there's a good planet reference and a big, something like that. But, when we went to school, Pluto was a planet, right? So times have changed. So I got to leave that subject alone. There will be a clamoring of Arch. And I think the pressure on Quinn in the offseason is going to be, more extra than it's ever been. Not only because there will be an open competition, but then there will be a fan base that will say, if he doesn't work out, let's bring in the other guy.
First of all, the irony of the shadows is because you originally, Casey Thompson, he's got the Hudson Card shadow. And didn't matter the bowl game performance that he had. You had guys like Sam Ehlinger who were saying, I wish I could. We had Sam Ehlinger wearing the Hudson Card underoos, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Hudson was the first shadow, and he shadows Casey. Mm-hmm. But then Quinn shows up and casts a shadow over Hudson, and now Arch has showed up and has cast a shadow over the whole damn program. I don't know that it's possible that Arch could be overshadowed. So we may be at peak shadowing, and we may not see any other shadowing other than this one for a while. It's presumed behind the scenes, and you and I have had this conversation, that when we talk about 2024, not 2023, when we talk about 2024, that there are expectations that Arch Manning will be the starting quarterback for Texas, also presumably as it gets ready to go into the SEC. It makes what happens in the next 12 months really interesting, because you've got Maalik, who's got to put a flag down and make a statement that he's relevant and can compete with Quinn. And you've got Quinn, who's got to put a flag down that says if he's not ready to go pro after next year, that he's good enough to warrant keeping Arch off the field, because it remains to be seen whether or not Arch would stick around till 2025 if he feels like he has to wait 3 years to be the starting quarterback at Texas. He could, but the math a year ago felt real easy and clean. Quinn plays 2 years, departs for the NFL. That's kind of what he's planned all along. Now, because Quinn didn't quite have the season in year 1 of what was expected to be 2, that, it kind of bleeds into the Arch Manning era more so than, well, he'll just redshirt and then take over for Quinn. So as much as next season and everything that happens in the spring and August practices will impact 2023, there's also some indirect impacting on 2024. And there's just a lot of things that this coaching staff will be juggling at once. They've got to keep Maalik happy. You don't want Maalik to transfer. When we talk about snap allocation, if Maalik feels he's not getting a real run at Quinn and he can feel Arch snipping at his heels, you can see a world where suddenly there's 2 quarterbacks on campus, not including Charles Wright, but, the forgotten man on scholarship for the moment. So there's just so many dynamics in play of what it means for each of these 3 guys as they navigate through a 2023 cycle where they all have slightly different agendas, right? I mean, Maalik would love to overtake Quinn, but first and foremost, he just needs to prove that he deserves to hold his place in this competition. And maybe for a year, hold off Arch if that's at all possible, because all of these things are difficult and Quinn's got to hold off all of them. And if you're Arch, if your plan is to be a starter in 2024, then you really do have to make gains in 2023 so that it doesn't look like you just came out of nowhere and supplanted not just one guy who's potentially a 2-year starter at the position, but a guy who's also very talented that came in a year before you did.
Yeah, Catch. And, what's interesting is a lot of things that pop in my head. What's interesting about how this whole thing, you talk about everyone's different thought processes and agendas. This was supposed to be a 2-year plan with Quinn. And if it plays out like the 2-year plan that everybody has anticipated, the conversation is a lot easier, Catch. We're talking about Quinn being a standout in this season, then next year getting ready to 1 more year to the NFL. And then basically we're just talking about a battle between, Arch and probably Maalik after that. But now that kind of pushes it back where, the season didn't go to the point where you can say that guy, is going to the NFL next year. He's almost got to have some sort of, lightning bolt, Heisman Trophy competing kind of season to have that, kind of what we saw from the TCU quarterback, right? You just got to come out of nowhere and blaze. And so it's interesting now, especially when you mentioned Maalik, and as I think about it, Malik's got to walk out of the spring, Catch, feeling like if he's not number 1, it's got to be 51%, 49%. Like, he's got to feel like he's that damn close. He can't walk out of there out of spring feeling like it's 80-20, right? I'm not even close. I can't sniff it. That's not it. Because at that point, then Maalik, it's the era of transfer portal. We're not speaking it, but we have to have a real conversation. Malik's got to say, okay, I've got some options, that are out there. So Malik's got to keep this thing close. But yes, if all of a sudden Arch is behind him and Arch is nipping at Maalik, and now all of a sudden the gap between them is not that far, that high, then that makes that room a little bit more interesting. It makes it, it's going to be harder. And I think Sarkisian, correct me if I'm wrong, he almost alluded to how hard it is to keep guys in this era of the transfer portal. Do you remember exactly what he talked about?
Well, Yesterday he mentions that they are young at quarterback and that they're probably in an era now where you're not ever going to have experience in the backup quarterback position unless you go out to the portal. You find a guy with some experience that's okay with being at a school like Texas and kind of being used a little bit. But hey, he's not the future, but he potentially can play if in a pinch, but he's kind of the buffer between young guy and maybe the starter. Sark didn't even bring that up. I'm just in theory talking about what could happen. But otherwise, you've got guys that want to be the starter. And when guys aren't the starter, they transfer. And it forever leaves you in a position where you've got really young guys as the backup. And it seems like he understands that and he's completely comfortable with it. And, I think that spoke to if Maalik is the starter next year, he's a redshirt freshman. Not as a starter, excuse me. If he's the chief backup, he's a redshirt freshman. And if it's not him, it's Arch Manning, and he's a true freshman. And there's not really anything they can do about that because if they were to try, you're literally cutting off their access to quality reps, which they need in their own development when their time does arrive. So even if you went to the portal to get an experienced quarterback, you'd need that guy to be okay maybe running the scout team because you need your young guys getting the reps that they need and not being wasted away. It's probably going to be like that for at least the next half decade.
Yeah. So here's what he talked about, Catch. I found it. He said, and kind of repeating what he said, he goes, you always want to have 4 quarterbacks on scholarship. And then he started talking about, but it may not, be all the older guys. And then he said that in this day and age of college football and the transfer portal, goes, I don't know how many times you're going to have your young, juniors. Said you're not going to have your junior, senior type backup quarterbacks on the roster, is what he says. So he goes, we better get used to developing young quarterbacks because that's probably the world we're going to be living in the future. So he kind of like exactly like what you said. But yes, he's acknowledging that, hey, these guys ain't going to hang around. Like these guys are not going to hang around for 3 or 4 years just to get their shot. Transfer portals kind of changed all that. So it kind of gives us a little credence to the things that we're talking about. And like I said, it will be very interesting, Catch, as we go forward, what kind of gains Arch can make as he gets here, gets on campus in January, or be there in the dorms, somewhere. And what kind of gains can he make? And then if he can make gains, you start looking at, well, who's the odd man out? Quinn's already transferred once, right? So you don't expect him to really, leave. Arch is kind of, there. Like Maalik kind of becomes your X factor as to what happens there. And if he can push and Catch, I keep hearing, that he's going to be given every opportunity to win the job in the offseason. Like I keep hearing that, Sark thinks very highly of Maalik and believes in him and his ability. And so he's going to be given an opportunity. He's going to be given a chance, to do it. It's just going to be a matter of can he take advantage of it, because he did mention Maalik again, Catch. Like when I asked him about young guys and guys who were standing out, like Malik's name has come up, I think, twice since the season has ended, as far as a guy who's been looking good and playing pretty well. So, we're not trying to create anything over here, but just trying to kind of put what's out there and what's at stake.
Let's transition a little bit from this discussion from what happens next year to what happens in the bowl game as we think about our Prize Picks side of this video.
Sure.
And we got to look at Quinn. I'm going to play a little game with you, okay?
All right.
We're going to play a little more or less, and I'm going to keep going north until you tell me to stop. So Quinn Ewers passing yards in the bowl game, more or less 225.
I'm going to go more.
245.
I mean, can he get over 250? All right.
It's one of the worst defensive backs.
Yes,
they're awful against the pass.
And Pac-12 teams are not that traditionally not that good because TCU wasn't that good either. So, and they entered in with one of the worst defenses in the country.
There's also no Bijan or Roshan.
And there's none. So he's got
proven part of the offense in theory is the passing game.
I think I'm gonna go one more time more, and then let's go from there.
255.
Oh, you're making it too difficult. I'm because 255 is kind of my sweet spot right there. Like 255. Shoot. I'm gonna play it safe. I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna say less.
I think I would take the more, but
okay.
I take the more with completely feeling what you're saying. Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like when we did our prize picks videos the whole last half of the season, especially once we got through the real hard part, and it was like Kansas State, Baylor, and Kansas from a throw in the ball stamp. Like, I'm trying to remember down the stretch. Even in those last two games, we were like, okay, well, it'd be really important for Quinn to come out and reestablish who he is and what his rep is and put up a big game. And in the end, they either just ran the ball more or the weather also wasn't conducive for it all. They're playing like weather shouldn't be an issue.
Check this out. The last 4 games, K-State, $197, 2 touchdowns. TCU, 171 in an interception. Kansas, 107, a touchdown. Baylor, 194. So it wasn't a single one in the last 4 games over 200 yards.
It may be the biggest sucker bet of all time, taking the more. I just feel like if they don't, they're not winning this game, is the way I feel. Mm-hmm. That if we don't see Quinn Ewers come out and throw for at least 255, Texas won't win this game. That's the way I feel. Now, am I forcing it? So it's like I'm declaring that it has to happen for Texas to win. Therefore, my confirmation bias is like, so he's going to do it. But the question is now, given those numbers, not what you and I would take. What do we think Prize Picks? I think they'll probably set this closer to 225.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, they would. Absolutely.
Based on what he's been doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because maybe if they set it at 255, even if we think he goes over it, wouldn't the smart play at that point is to put in an entry for less, just given the fact that it's been so far away from 250 for the last month of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, they put it at 225. I mean, I don't know, because the closest that he's gotten to that was 194 versus Baylor. But to your point, they stopped passing the ball against Baylor. Like, they just abandoned that pass. So, and you would imagine that he's going to have to win it. I mean, we've heard tons of great stuff about Jonathan Brooks and what he's been able to do. But is he ready to be, something close, somewhere between a Roshan and a Bijan? I don't know. But we hear a lot of great things about him. Some people told me they think he's going to be a draftable guy at some point. We shall see. We'll know a little bit more coming this week. That's going to be tough. Here's the other thing, Catch. Your Prize Picks. On the flip side, what do you do with Penix? Like, what ends up being that number that they set for him? And, if you start at 255.
It'll be much higher than that.
So you're thinking maybe 300 is what they start at? 305?
I took a less on Penix Jr. for I think the UCLA game. It was set at 320.5. And he went more. And I was like, he's not throwing that. He throws the ball that much. Mm-hmm. I think they're going to set it around 300. At which point I would take the less. The thing is, they throw it against everybody. And they come into this game with 2 1,000-yard receivers. Their number 3 receiver has as many yards receiving as Xavier Worthy does. They're both in the 600s. So Washington comes in as the absolute proven commodity throwing the football. I think they're going to set that number close to 300 for Penix Jr., and I'll take the less, but don't say you weren't warned. You know, like we think that he's playing against a Texas defense that will perform better than these Pac-12 defenses have performed, but this dude has thrown for a lot of yards against basically everybody.
Yeah, I mean, dude is absolutely he's going to toss it, he's going to throw it. Like you know, this has got to be. You would on paper it looks like it has to be a track meet catch. Like it looks like it's got to be up and down. I mean, the Texas defense has played well. We understand that, and maybe those guys, but we're still talking about no DeMarvion. That's going to be on that team. So it'll be very. I don't know. It's you got to feel like what's your number, Catch? What's the number that wins this game? Is it 35, 38?
35.
35.
Yeah. But to do that, both of the quarterbacks, are good. The thing about Washington is they do stop the run well. They rank 33rd in the country in run defense. That puts them in the top quarter of teams in college football defending the run. That's not to say that Texas won't have success running the ball. It's just to say that this isn't like powder puff football that the Washington they don't defend the pass well. They do defend the run well, and it means on paper the best way to take advantage of that is with Quinn Ewers' arm. It just remains to be determined whether or not we're at a point where that's something you can take to the bank. Here's the deal. Guys, we'll hold the rest of the Prize Picks conversations outside of the quarterbacks for early next week when we have our larger game predictions video with myself, Anwar, Jason, Alex. The whole crew will be back for that. This was just a little bit of a teaser with regards to the quarterbacks on both teams. But for myself and Anwar and Blake producing, the guys over at Prize Picks, let me just stress again one more time. Promo code Orange Bloods. Play the game that has overtaken the Orange Blood staff. We talk about it daily.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, I was at Prize Picks earlier today, and I haven't yet seen their daily promotion yet. Like, they've got me fiending for some Thursday action. But for myself and Anwar Richardson and the guys over at Prize Picks, we'll do this again in a couple of days. Until then, you guys be good to each other. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Later.